In 1960, the American Football League was born, founded by a group of men who believed their enterprise could succeed against the older, more established NFL. Few experts gave the new league a chance. The early years were plagued by small crowds in ramshackle stadiums, watching players of dubious ability. But after several seasons of growing pains, the league began to find its own stars, its own audience, its own identity. By its 10th and final season, the AFL had gone from Bush League to a world championship. 2 stunning Super Bowl victories over NFL powerhouses convinced the football world that the AFL was no longer just the other league. In Super Bowl IV, Len Dawson quarterbacked the Kansas City Chiefs to a decisive victory over the NFL champion Minnesota Vikings.
Dawson, quick count. Dawson, close sideline pattern. Taylor. Taylor rolls. 20, 25. He cuts back. 20. He's going to go.
In this, the final AFL-NFL Super Bowl, the other league had more than proven its equality. It was an especially gratifying moment for the man who had started it all just a decade before, Chiefs owner Lamar Hunt. In 1960, Hunt and a group of men who came to be known as the Foolish Club started the American Football League. The AFL's goal was to bring pro football to new cities, but the initial costs were steep.
Things were so bad in the league that we'd have these meetings and everybody would compare notes on how much money they had lost. You know, it was like a badge of honor. Unless you lost $1 million, you were a nobody.
The Dallas Texans pro football team, which was my team, was losing $1 million a year, and my dad is supposed to have said, well, at that rate, he'll be in trouble in 142 years.
Of more immediate concern was finding players to perform on the 8 new teams. Throughout the league, tryout camps attracted the overweight, the underage, every bartender and cab driver who ever harbored Walter Mitty fantasies about playing pro football. League credibility was further taxed when players on the Denver Broncos wore bargain basement uniforms that featured comical vertical striped socks. The AFL parks were aging Depression-era structures or high school fields. Oakland Stadium was named for an undertaker, and as injured players sometimes found out, medical care was not always a big league caliber either.
The knee was pretty serious. I had really torn up the ligaments, and they didn't quite know what to do, so they sent me to this Dallas team doctor to have it checked. It seemed to be getting worse day by day. And it turns out that the Dallas team doctor was a proctologist, so he really didn't have a whole lot to tell me about my knee.
Grosscup played for the New York Titans, the most financially troubled of all the franchises. The Titans owner was a colorful sportscaster named Harry Wismer.
Hello, football fans. It's kickoff time for National Pro Highlights. And this is your Pro Highlights quarterback, Harry Wismer.
Harry Wismer was the most eccentric owner in the history of professional football. Harry was known to make long-distance phone calls to anyone and everyone. He would make long-distance bed checks to the players, and sometimes he would call his coaches. Harry was also known to page himself. He would page himself in hotel lobbies. Harry would announce that we had a crowd of 25,000 people. And it prompted one New York sports writer to write that there was a crowd of 25,000 people, but 20,000 of those people came disguised as empty seats.
Fortunately, attendance was considerably better for the other teams. the league was able to attract new fans with a wide open and daring style of play. A few critics sniffed that the AFL was exciting because no one played defense. And sometimes they were right. The AFL was big on long bombs, swollen scores, and schoolyard plays. But seldom was heard a discouraging word from the league's followers.
In the early history of the American Football League, it was necessary for us to do as good a job as we could to appeal to the fans. And we knew that the one way to do it was to put the ball in the air often. Our fans didn't care where it went as long as the ball was thrown down the field.
Supporters of the establishment called the AFL a bush league. But the new kids on the block didn't see it that way. The wild antics of the early years provided the fans with a stimulating contrast to the staid and conservative NFL. In the first years, the Houston Oilers were the dominant team of the AFL. Oiler President Bud Adams saw to that by signing big-name talent like Heisman Trophy winner Billy Cannon, along with such names as Blanda, Tolar, Groman, and Hennigan. The Oilers were AFL champs twice and played for a third title against another Lone Star team, the Dallas Texans. Soon, other clubs were ready to challenge the Oilers. Coaches were making names for themselves, but the most obvious reason for healthy competition was a cluster of new stars. In Boston, an ex-bartender named Gino Capoletti combined kicking and receiving skills to become the league's all-time leading scorer. Running back Abner Haynes was the league's first rushing champion and captain of the 1962 champion Dallas Texans. Quarterback George Blanda was supposed to be washed up when he came to the Oilers, but his 36 touchdown passes in a single season is a pro record that still stands. 250-pound fullback Cookie Gilchrist won 2 rushing titles, played on a championship team in Buffalo, and is regarded by many to be the greatest runner in league history. Fullback Matt Snell was the first #1 draft choice signed by the Jets, immediately giving the New York franchise credibility in America's media center. Denver's Lionel Taylor won the league receiving crown 5 times, including 1 season with 100 catches. In Oakland, the Raiders went to the air with the help of number 84 Art Powell, the 3rd leading receiver in league history. And on the ground, Oakland turned to halfback Clem Daniels, who finished his career as the AFL's top rusher. Each club could boast great players, but one team had more stars than anyone else. Few teams in football history have ever amassed an offensive armada to equal the San Diego Chargers. The team locker room was an AFL who's who, men who could bring to life the innovative strategies of head coach Sid Gilman.
First time he was 50, went cover 7. Second time he was 40, still went cover 7. I haven't seen any strong coverage yet.
The Charger offensive machine could beat you on the ground. In Keith Lincoln and Paul Lowe, number 23, San Diego had two of the best backs that ever played in the AFL. But it was in the air where Charger lightning struck its mightiest blows. And the most electrifying of them all was number 19 Hall of Famer Lance Allworth. Gilman's passing techniques brought pro football into the modern era. But it wasn't until Sid changed training sites that he brought San Diego an AFL championship.
He took us to a place about 80 miles east of San Diego, up in the mountains. It was called, I mean, the actual name of it was called Rough Acres. Can you imagine a town called Rough Acres? They had about 11 people in it. It was hot as can be. You just couldn't imagine how hot it was. The food was awful. I mean, you couldn't get a self-respecting cook to go up there. And I think the guy who was our chef was a guy who was a short order cook at a little truck stop on the highway.
Whatever was in their summer camp food must have agreed with the Chargers. In the 1963 season, they rolled to a division crown and won the AFL championship with a 51-10 shellacking of the Boston Patriots. The Chargers won 5 division titles in their first 6 years and became the glamour team of the AFL. But by the mid-60s, a new power was emerging. The Buffalo Bills won as few league teams had ever won before with defense. As the Chargers advanced the art of scoring, so the Bills promoted the idea of preventing it. On an icy December day in 1964, the Bills hosted the defending champion Chargers in the AFL title game. The early moments of the contest ran true to form. San Diego scored easily on its first possession. But then Buffalo linebacker Mike Stratton, number 58, changed the course of the game with the most famous tackle in league history.
Stratton just really laid my friend Keith Lincoln out flat, and you could just see the emotion and the passion and the credibility of the Buffalo Bills come together at that point.
San Diego never recovered from Lincoln's loss, while Jack Kemp and the inspired Bills showed the Chargers some offense of their own. Buffalo's victory over San Diego marked the end of the Charger era and the beginning of a 3-year reign for the Bills as the league's dominant team. Shining new stadiums were a sign of league growth prompted by 2 major events. One was a lucrative television contract that kept the league solvent. But the greatest stir was caused when Jets owner Sonny Werblin offered a then unheard of $400,000 contract to rookie quarterback Joe Namath. This single act showed that the AFL now had the dollars and the power to lure big-name talent away from the NFL.
Your National League got a little too damn cocky there at that time because a lot of these teams had been signing a lot of the better boys out of college. And Kansas City signed some great boys out of college.
There was several crazy instances of babysitting campaigns where one league or the other would hide players out to try to keep them away from the other league. And in one case that we found very pleasing through the years, we were able to spirit a player named Otis Taylor out of a motel window where he was being held by the NFL representatives. He went to Kansas City and signed with us and became one of the great receivers in pro football history.
With Taylor catching and Len Dawson throwing, the Chiefs won the league championship in 1966. Explosive through the air, Kansas City was as tough on the ground as running back Mike Garrett, number 21, rushed to Rookie of the Year honor. On defense, the Chiefs had the biggest line in league history, featuring Red Woods, Buck Buchanan, and Jerry Mays. Further support came from other stars such as Johnny Robinson and Bobby Bell, both eventual members of the all-time AFL team. Good as Kansas City was, they could always count on trouble from another power right in their own division. The Oakland Raiders under Al Davis won more games in the league's last 5 seasons than any other team. A defensive unit known as the 11 Angry Men was one reason why. Davidson, Birdwell, Connors, McLuhan, and Brown were among the members of a Raider defense that frequently made scores of their own. But most of the points came from the arm of quarterback Darryl LaMonica, the mad bomber who perfectly implemented Al Davis's deep passing game. The Raiders and Chiefs became the league's best teams, and each would get their chance to represent the AFL in the first 2 showdowns against the National League. In 1966, the 2 leagues agreed on a merger and scheduled a championship game called the Super Bowl. But the Green Bay Packers easily dispatched Kansas City in the inaugural game. A year later, the Packers pummeled the Raiders as the National League triumphed again. NFL boosters could barely contain their glee. The AFL upstart had gotten their comeuppance from headmaster Vince Lombardi. The prospects looked even worse in Super Bowl III at Miami's Orange Bowl. The mighty Baltimore Colts took on the New York Jets and their brash quarterback Joe Namath, who incredibly guaranteed victory. NFL fans were certain Namath would regret his boast. But Broadway Joe and the Jets shocked the pro football world as the 18-point underdogs pulled off the greatest upset in NFL history. Namath riddled the vaunted Colt defense with pinpoint passes, and the maligned New York defense did not allow a single point until late in the 4th quarter.
You can't imagine the feeling that I had being a part of the American Football League to see the Jets defeat the Baltimore Colts, because I was sitting in the stands and all around me were people cheering for the National Football League. And I was the lone voice there, and they kept saying how strong that they were. And I sat silent. The first quarter, the second quarter, they were telling me, you know, how Baltimore's going to come back and how we were the inferior league. And then about the 4th quarter, I finally stood up and said, well, how do we look now against the great NFL?
The AFL was the other league no more.